So thank you for having given such a wonderful opportunity, especially the head of the department, Dr. Geeta ma'am, Bindu ma'am, and all the distinguished staff of University Department of Education, University of Kerala. And with this, let me now share my presentation. Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Is that in full screen mode?
Yeah, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. So once again, thank you so much for having given such a wonderful opportunity. And before getting into it, let me take a disclaimer as said by Dr. Bintu ma'am. I'm not an expert in environment, but rather the background in microbiology and having been in many of the committees of Kerala State Council for Science, Technology and Environment regarding the policy framework and also the Children's Science Congress program, where each day the government of Kerala is conducting the national level Children's Science Congress, and have been part of the academic committee. And one of the main things that are taught to the teachers of these children are the ecosystem services that which is an essential part that we have to teach to the students, right? I mean, children right in their school age, to create awareness to them onto various ecosystem practices and services, and to have projects in them. So, with this background, let me now move into my presentation. So, today I've taken the topic called ecosystem restoration towards avoiding future pandemics. Rightly, as we all are seeing, we are amidst a very big pandemic. The COVID-19 has attacked us. It started in December 2019, and still still having its worst form, taking so much of lives. So it all started with the degradation of the ecosystem that was mainly catered due to the human activities. So I thought of sharing some insights onto this as part of the World Environment Day program here. And as everybody was rightly saying, you have got a very good introduction onto the changing lifestyles based on, in order to cater to the restoration of environment from the previous, distinguished persons. And the theme of 2021 World Environment Day. Today is the World Environment Day. It's the 5th of June, and the theme is ecosystem restoration. And this particular day is the importance is that the United Nations principal vehicle for encouraging awareness and action for the protection of the environment. So what you see in the right side is what I have copied from their blog or their website. It is the time to reimagine, to recreate and restore, and that's our moment. We cannot turn back time, but we can grow more trees, green our cities, rewild our gardens, change our diets, and clean up rivers and coast. And we are the generation that can make peace with nature. And what we want is to get active, not anxious. Like, let's be bold and not timid. And today we had a wonderful starting by that invocation, and I thank Sandra for beautifully entering that. At the end of the day, all we have to take is that നല്ല നല്ല കാര്യങ്ങൾ ചെയ്യുവാനും നല്ല വാക്ക് പറയുവാനും നമുക്ക് ആവേണമേ. അത് തന്നെ ആയിരിക്കണം നമ്മുടെ ഇന്നത്തെ ടേക്ക് അവേ മെസ്സേജ്. And coming to ecosystem, so we may begin with what is ecosystem? It's a community of living and non-living things that all we work together, where the living community interacts with the non-living world or the non-living environment, and it consists of abiotic that is the soil, water, air, which is the non-living counterpart, and the biotic parts, which is the flora and fauna that is associated with the environment. An ecosystem can be as large as a desert, or it can be as small as a tree. Sorry, which means that it's a community where a whole lot of organisms live in harmony with each other, and the size is not just a matter, but it can be as small as a tree or as large as a desert. And it is the place where the living organisms interact with each other and its surrounding environment. So, why are the healthy ecosystems important? In the sense that the healthy ecosystems clean our water, they purify our air, maintain our soil, regulate the climate, recycle the nutrients, provide us with food, and they also provide raw materials and resources for medicines and other purposes. As you all know, most of the currently used drugs, for different medications that are all derived from plants and also the environmental, present microorganisms. So they are the ones that provide the raw materials for what we are enjoying today. And the key indicator of the health of an ecosystem is definitely its biodiversity. And what are ecosystem services? So it means the benefits that the people obtain from the ecosystem, and it can be from the availability of adequate food and water to disease regulation of vectors. So this is the point where we have to remember, the outbreak of the pandemic is associated with this. In that, the ecosystem services is the ones which regulate the vectors, pests, and pathogens in the normal environment. And then it also caters to the human health and well-being and depends on these activities and conditions from the natural environment. And they also include provisioning, regulating, and cultural services, which we can deal with in the next slide, that directly affect the people. And also they provide supporting services needed to maintain the other services. And it provides habitat to wild plants, several wild plants and animals, and promotes various food chains and food webs. It controls essential ecological processes and promotes life. I've told you about the 4 different ecosystem services that has been provided, and one of the perspectives that it is to be approached is providing awareness to the society in terms of how what kind of benefits that we get from the ecosystem. That is to be made aware of to all the sections of the society. And here comes the importance of the classification system that forms the basis of the classification system, that is MA classification system, which was proposed in 2005. And the 4 important services that has been provided by the ecosystem being the provisioning in terms of good food, fresh water, food and other raw materials which are provided from the environment, and then the regulating services that has been how it affects the regulation of other sections of the environment, other things of the environment like the climate regulation, flood regulation, disease regulation, water purification, etc. And then cultural, how the kind of aesthetic services that are being provided, the spiritual, educational, and recreational. And again, it is also having a supporting role in terms of nutrient cycling, soil formation, primary production. So all these linked to the constituents of the well-being of a human being, wherein it provides security in terms of personal services, personal safety, secure resource access, security from disasters, and provides basic materials for good life like adequate livelihood, sufficient nutritious food, shelter, access to good, and then health services that health well-being like strength, feeling well, access to clean air and water that being provided by the cultural services, and then with social relations like social cohesion, mutual respect, ability to help other. All these comes from the various ecosystem services that are being provided. And again, we have got a freedom of choice and action and opportunity to be able to achieve what an individual values doing and being. So you can see the arrows, how well it is it's interconnected. That can be shown by the color and also the strength of the width of the arrows that are presented. And what are the human health impacts of health ecosystem alteration? And human activity, as you know, is rapidly transforming the most of Earth's natural systems. In that, we changes the land cover, and there is changes in land use in terms of deforestation and setting up of dams and irrigation, agricultural extension, intensification, livestock management, urbanization, and again road construction. So these all alters the land which is available for already there for the forest is being cut and then used for other purposes. And then resource scarcity of resources in terms of land degradation, there is scarcity of water, forests are being cut, and again wildlife populations are getting declined due to habitat destruction. And then there is a climate change, because of the activities of human. There is the global temperature is being low. There is global warming and elevated carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and more extreme storms and hydrological extreme, and there is sea level rise. These are all evident. And all these are contributing to the deterioration of ecological services like the provision for safe water, clean air, protection from the natural hazards, regulation of infectious diseases, maintenance of stability. We are all witnessing from the couple of, for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, that we are having emerging infections like Nipah, and then we had stormy like storms like Oki, and the ones which have come in the previous week. And then we have witnessed the flood, that is 2018 flood, 19 flood. So this we are witnessing, it's in front of us only. So all these factors contributing to negative health outcomes. So you can see here the degradation of the ecosystem services. It increases the likelihood of zoonotic transfer, the transfer of diseases from animals to humans, that is the zoonotic transfer, simultaneously with declining water. And at the left extreme, you can see with the degradation in the ecosystems, there is decreasing dilution effect, which means that there is decreasing in the decrease in the number of wild animals. There is some decrease in the dilution effect, in the sense that normally the pathogens are normally present in the wild animals. When they get transferred to different organisms, there are chances that if there are diverse number of animals, there are chances that this pathogenicity may get diluted. But the situation is getting reversed as number of wild animals are being killed and then their habitat destroyed. So there is decreasing in dilution effect of viable pathogenic carriers, viable microorganisms that is able to cause diseases. And eventually what happens is that from these wild animals, they get access to the human settlements, and then decreasing regulating services, buffering the zoonotic transfer. And again, with the aid of bushmeat stores and wet markets, as we have seen in China, right, from where this pandemic has arose. And that all created transfer of these particular organisms from animals to humans. Also, in the right side, you can see there is decreased availability of water and other vital services that has led to compromised treatment strategies and compromised hygiene, which made the human beings vulnerable to such infections. And I've already told you the emergence. So there is emergence, re-emergence, and spread of zoonosis. There is emergence of new strains of viruses and bacteria and other infectious agents. And then there is already settled infections are coming up again. That is the re-emergence of the infections, and there is spread of zoonosis. They're all mainly due to the human activities and human interventions, rapid population growth, population movement, climate change, deforestation, rapid urbanization, expansion of travel, agricultural trade, antibiotic resistance. So antimicrobial resistance being one of the main factors, and one of the major threat that you are going to witness in the later years, after this settlement of this pandemic, would be the emergence of would be the antimicrobial resistance, because for need and there is overuse and exploitation of the antibiotics, not just for human needs, but also for it is used as animal feeds, cattle feeds, for livestock, for aquatic culturing. Unnecessarily, they are being used in order to get better growth of these particular things, like cattle and livestock. So what happens is that many of the organisms present in the environment, they can get resistant to the imported antibiotics that is available today, and that can lead to creation of antibiotic resistant bacteria, and which is going to create havoc. So we'll not be having medications to treat such infections caused by such bacteria. So the new zoonotic diseases emerges due to increased contact between the wild and farmed animals that have already. And there are 7 anthropogenic drivers of zoonotic disease emergence as per the reports of United Nations Environment Program, which is released in 2020, as to that there is an increasing demand of animal protein. So the meat products, there is a demand for that. And that demand has led to unsustainable agricultural intensification in terms of more that express available today. And there is changes in food supply chains in the sense that the markets are being changed based on the demands of the market. Demands like the meat stalls, etc., are being increased, and then obviously the climate change. And coming to a historical perspective of the coming up of infectious diseases, over the millennia, people have used and changed the habitable environment, and the agriculture and settlements developed 10,000 years ago. And again, several of today's most pervasive diseases originally emerged after the domestication of livestock or wild cattle. For example, the diseases which are currently of major threat like the tuberculosis, measles, and the one which we are successful in eradicating through vaccines, that is the smallpox. And many pathogens that are currently passed from one person to person, that is the anthropootic, including some influenza virus, then HIV, where formerly they were initially zoonotic diseases. They were transferred from animals to humans, but have diverged genetically from their ancestors that occurred in animal host. Again, after getting entry into the humans, they change their genetic pattern in terms of mutation that happens, and now the original strain is no longer present. So another strain, which can be the human strain, that is now causing most of the threats. So what are zoonotic? As the infectious agents of pathogens of vertebrate mammals that infect the human as incidental hosts. They are termed as zoonotic, and the diseases that are caused are called as the zoonoses. So when take a look at the WHO report on in 2004, and the things would have changed much at present. But to have a look at the leading death cause globally, you can see the contribution by various diseases, and cardiovascular disease dominates in that. The heart attacks, then cancer, respiratory digestive disease, injuries, maternal perinatal conditions, and obviously others. So infectious diseases, about 26% of the leading death cause globally, that is mainly due to the infectious diseases. You can see the respiratory infections, HIV, diarrheal disease, tuberculosis, malaria, childhood disease, and others. So all these are nothing but zoonotic diseases. And what is the reason? Is mainly the habitat destructions. It threatens the biodiversity. It leads to biodiversity loss and convert all the original habitats, wildlife habitats, to for crops, livestock, and the growing human population. And there are obviously the changes in the number of vector breeding sites or reservoir. As you can see, the case of dengue each year during the rainy time, we are witnessing the dengue outbreak of dengue. So there are changes in the number of vector breeding sites, mosquito breeding sites, reservoir host distribution is changing, and the niche invasions, the habitat invasions, causes interspecies host transfers. And again, the changes in biodiversity is there, including loss of predator species are being lost. So if at all a species is present in abundance, there will be predator species which can kill the that maintains the food chain. So in the case that when the predator species is lost, there will be changes in biodiversity and there will be changes in crop population. So I think there is a disturbance. Okay, thank you. So there would be human-induced genetic changes, that is the mutation of disease vectors or pathogens such as mosquito resistance to pesticides or emergence of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, which I've already covered with. And also sometimes there would be environmental contamination. The infectious agents may be contaminated with some of the genetic materials from other strains, and then that could result in eventually producing yet another strain. And what are the factors that are involved in disease emergence and re-emergence are obviously the human host and the human environment, where the microbial agent is getting adapted, genetic adaptation, and change is taking place, along with the polymicrobial diseases like the multiple infections or the secondary or complex infections are coming out. And all these, because of the human susceptibility, either to human susceptibility of infection, and where there's human settled, that is the demographics and their behavior, their international trade and travel, and whether that depends on whether there is some intention to harm, or conscious intention to cause harm. Like we have speculations that the coronavirus have come from some Chinese lab or something, but we are not supposed to comment on that until a strong background is there. Yet this is what we have meant. There is some intent to harm, like bioterrorism, and occupational exposures. In terms, somebody will be working in sewages. This all depends on their occupational exposures. So inappropriate use of antibiotics, and again, human environment in which the humans live, how far it affects, like the climate and weather can affect on that, and then changing ecosystems, environment, economic development, and the land use, technology and industry is creating an impact on the environment, and then poverty and social inequality, lack of public health services, animal population, war and famine, and lack of political will. So all the transfer of an infectious disease from animals to human all take place from environment or from the other animals. It all depends on how we interact with the human, we interact, and the environment in which we live in, and the interactions with the animal world. So all happens is that what happens is that when we take a look at from where did all these germs originated, right? The infectious bacteria or virus or fungi, or how do they from where do they originate? When we look at that, you can see a lot of it all started from the wildlife. Normally, the organisms may be normally present in the wildlife, and they can get transferred to either through the domestic animals, or if they can directly pass from the wildlife, or you can see from monkeys, rodents, bats, etc. Either they can take a vector, for dengue and all, it needs a vector to pass to humans, or for some other diseases, it can directly get transferred. So all the outcome of all is that of either, different. There is a distributive pattern where it can either become a sporadic, that means in the sense that it occurs in scattered or isolated instances. And if it recurs as a regular number of cases in a particular area, it can be called as endemic. So the endemic disease, if it affects an unusually high number of people in a particular area itself, that can be called an epidemic. And when it crosses the borders and spread across the continents of the whole world, occurring as a series of epidemics. And we are right now witnessing a pandemic, that is the pandemic. And you can see the example of some of the infections like Ebola, which was transferred from fruit bats, and again the Nipah, again from US fruit bats, influenza from swine, then HIV from monkeys, chimpanzees, etc. And what we learned from COVID-19 is that we have not learned from the past previous pandemics that have arose, that has shook the world, previously. For example, if you see the zoonotic origin of this pandemics, right from 165 AD itself, there was smallpox. The orange color, what is shown as smallpox, it recurred in quite a number of periods, and we were able to eradicate that completely using vaccines. But you can see that it was originated from rodents. And then plague took about 200 million people, life of 200 million people. And it also occurred, the light blue color, you can see again rods and fleas to be the causative agents for the disease. And then cholera from contaminated rice, then yellow fever, H1N1, then HIV, and precisely say the SARS, that is the 2002 pandemic. It was not a pandemic, it came as an epidemic in China, the SARS, that is severe acute respiratory syndrome. That is the first, this is the second one. Today, now we are witnessing is SARS-CoV-2. This is the first one. And that emanated from, and that was first detected in China, and through the civet cat was an intermediary. It's not some animal which is belonging to cat family, but it has more relations to mongoose. That civet cat, which was as like pangolins now for Corona COVID-19. It was available for sale in the markets of China. And then novel H1N1, which was not available previously, H1N1. And then MERS, that is the Middle East respiratory syndrome. That outbreak was during 2012, and the camel was the intermediary host. And again, Ebola, the bats as the host, and now the COVID-19. That is the proper reservoirs being the bats or pangolins, which need to be established. And as the transmission capacity, the major cause for is definitely the human activity, which we have already covered upon, like the deforestation, habitat destruction, road mining, road building, mining, hunting, logging, urbanization, population growth, etc., etc. You can see the organisms getting transmitted from wildlife to the humans, and it spreads. And some of the persons we have shown in different colors, it spreads only to those who are immunologically compromised. But the second wave that we have witnessing right now is affecting the immunologically strong people also. Such is the nature of mutation and invasiveness of a virus. And in the right side, you can see the bushmeat stall with pangolins, bush rats and tiger cats for sale in the roadside outside of in Guinea, Equatorial Guinea. So just for the information that I've put it. And we have witnessed the outbreak of Nipah in 2018. Nipah virus, which have taken the life of about 17 persons from Kerala, and including a nurse. And the Nipah virus belongs to the family Paromyxa virus, which is having a single-stranded RNA as the genetic material. And by Nipah means it was originated in Sungai Nipah, where that's a village in Malaysia where pig farmers became ill with encephalitis. It's a brain fever in 1999, and later it occurred in Bangladesh and Philippines in 2014, and then in Kerala in 2018. So this is the outbreaks of this particular disease, and the main reservoir being the fruit bat. And the virus transmission from the bats to humans occur through inhalation, contact, consumption of Nipah virus contaminated food. And then now the coronavirus. Since we are witnessing that right now, I think you need to have an information. Probably you would have information is everywhere available. You need to have what it is. The Coronaviridae. That viruses belongs to the family Coronaviridae. Again, it is an enveloped single-stranded RNA virus. It has got an envelope, and it's got RNA as the genetic material. It shows the crown-like morphology when seen under the electron microscope, hence the name corona. And based on the difference in the protein sequences, that is the envelope, the coronavirus is classified alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. And now the most human coronavirus are the beta coronavirus, and which is the reservoirs being the bats and rodents. Unlike this thing, gamma and delta, the birds are the reservoir. So the first coronavirus was detected in 1966. There is the human coronavirus 229E, and then later in 1967, human coronavirus OC43. So though there were outbreaks of these particular viruses, and they are distributed globally, they tend to be predominantly transmitted during some season of winter in the temperate climate, and infection is not so severe. And in 2002, we had the emergence of SARS-CoV, and again in China. It's otherwise called atypical pneumonia that we are seeing right now for SARS-CoV-2 also. There is pneumonia. And first well-documented H-CoV caused pandemic in the human history is the SARS-CoV, which is in 2002. And there is 8,096 reported cases with 774 deaths. And then the third outbreak, third type of coronavirus detected was in 2004, H-CoV NL63 and H-CoV HKU1 from Netherlands and Hong Kong in 2004. And then MERS, that is the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome virus, it originated in Saudi Arabia in 2012 and South Korea in 2015. The clinical manifestations are similar to that of severe acute immune respiratory syndrome, that is the first coronavirus, SARS. But the difference was that it later stage, the death mainly due to the liver failure, and the fatality rate is 34.4%. And the SARS-CoV-2, this is the one which saw its presence in Wuhan, China in December 2019, and WHO later declared outbreak of the pandemic in March 11, 2020. So currently, as of June 3, 2021, the total cases are 17 crores, 24 lakh, 30,557, and it has taken the death of about 37 lakh, 6,682 persons, people globally. And coming to the animal origin of this coronavirus, as we have dealt with different coronavirus, almost 7 different coronavirus. I'll deal with SARS-CoV, and that was eventually transmitted from bat to civet cat and showed its presence in China. And then MERS, it was again transmitted from bat to camels and then shown its presence in Saudi Arabia initially. And then now the coronavirus 2, that is the SARS-CoV-2, it gets transmitted. It is hypothesized that, it is supposed that it has been transmitted from bats to pangolins and got transmitted. And coming to a little bit of the structure, to just have an overview of what is this corona looks like. And you have got an RNA. This is RNA virus. The RNA is safe inside the core, which is surrounded by a capsid, that is the protein, that is which we call as the nucleocapsid. And it is surrounded by an envelope, that is the lipid envelope. And there are numerous proteins, some of the key proteins which are project out, which is called as the spike proteins. You can see S1 and S2, the spike proteins. And there are other proteins like membrane proteins and envelope. So this is the complete virus structure. And you can, the main part, that is the protein, which gains entry into the lung cells of a human being, that is the spike protein. And the spike protein has got a particular site for a binding to the lung cell receptor called as the angiotensin converting enzyme, where it gains access to the lung cells. And once inside the lung cell, it takes the machinery of the lung cell to replicate thousands of copies of the RNA molecules in our lung cell. And then it again directs the cell to produce multiple copies of the proteins, that is the viral proteins, and then it assembles itself, comes out of the cell, killing that particular cell. So this is what happens when a SARS-CoV-2 gains access into our cells. And again, the SARS-CoV is not the same which was initially infected. It has got mutation. It began the revolutionary course with the pandemic. And then now I'm only depicting 4 of the mutant strains which is available. There are several mutations. Some of the mutations in India are B1617, that is responsible. So these are all the strains which is responsible for the second wave, highly infective second wave that we are witnessing right now. So B1617 and a combination of 2 different strains, and B117, which was first detected. We are not supposed to say that it's a UK strain, but it was initially detected in UK. So we are doing in that way. And then B1351 and P1. So these are the different mutated strains currently available. And the COVID pandemic has, there are positive and negative effects. The lockdown has created a situation where there is reduced emissions of the greenhouse gases, reduced fossil fuel consumption, reduced pollution, improved water quality, noise pollution is reduced, air quality is improved, then pollution in terms of, and there is ecological restoration. somewhat. But this is not going to be permanent. It is only temporary, and it will regain after once the human, it's back. Now they are in lockdown state, and there are also some maybe negative effects like the PPE, that is the protection devices, that protection equipments or things that we use now, and that increases the medical waste, hazardous waste, plastic waste are improved, and that creates at areas where they are dumped, soil and water pollution to that particular area, and then municipal waste, air, water, and soil pollution, and it lessens the recycling activities and increase the environmental pollution. So these are the pros and cons for one of the main systems that we have to introduce in managing and preventing the zoonosis is the One Health approach. It is nothing but the collaborative effort across the multiple. No, currently in the world or in India, the situation is that you are doing education. He's a doctor. He's a veterinary doctor, and everyone is having their own professions and they are happy at it. But that is not to be the case. Everybody should come together, sit together, and then devise strategies, policies to have a collaborative effort across multiple disciplines to attain optimal health for the people, animals, and the environment. As you can see, there is interaction between the human health, environment health, and animal health, all close to it. So this approach has emerged as a key tool for preventing and managing the diseases occurring at the interface of human, animal, and environment. And now we may conclude now by zoonotic diseases that involve and affect the human health, animal health, and environment health. So the thing is that the pathogens originate, we have seen that the pathogens originate in animals, and the emergence or spillovers on the disease, what we see in the humans is the result of the human actions itself, like the reasons which I've already told, intensifying the livestock production or degrading and fragmenting the ecosystems or exploiting the wildlife unsustainably. And as such, there is interconnection between all these things, and as such, their management should be intersectoral or interdisciplinary. And controlling and preventing zoonotic outbreaks requires that there should be coordinated interdisciplinary responses across human, animal, and environment health. And again, there is a need that, and hardly there in India, there are preventive or higher surveillance like that of flood prediction systems. Pralayam varunnathinu predict cheyanattulla there are systems we are seeing. So we need to have such surveillance systems in order to predict the emergence of pandemics, and in coordinated human, animal, and environment health services that are needed to ensure that emergence events do not turn into, even if an infectious disease or it emanates, we have to make sure that it doesn't pass on to become as a full-scale epidemics or pandemics. And it's important not to study the pathogens in isolation, but we have to understand better how human social behavior impacts the natural world, as well as the emergence and spread of the disease. And success can only occur if we address the root causes and the drivers of disease emergence, in the sense that which will require changing our behavior and actions in relation to the ecosystems. We'll have to find out the root causes. Where are we going wrong? And our present crisis in 2020 provides us with and still now, it gives us an opportunity to build back better. Collectively, we need to shift from the short term. We don't need to have short-term policies or short-term visions. We need to have long-term political commitments to secure human, animal, and environment health. And sustaining all the life on Earth depends on it. And there need to increase support is necessary to build resilient agroecological food systems, and that can rely on natural synergies and harness biological diversity for food production while protecting the important wildlife habitats. And again, we have hardly looked on to the environmental dimensions of One Health approach, but we have human health and the animal health. We have some idea, but we don't hardly have the idea on the environmental dimensions that has to be strengthened. And then leveraging the innovations and new technologies. For example, biotechnologies of major use. Currently you are seeing the RT-PCR technique, the reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction, that is of immense use for the diagnosis of this disease. So such investments are to be done in technologies like biotechnology, where you can gene sequence and identify the virus which is the causative agent. And then also leveraging the information communication technologies, which could help in disease surveillance, rapid response, and control. And while innovation is key to the pandemic solution, you need to ensure the improved biosecurity, and we have to make sure that the virus, which is being studied in a lab, is not getting spread outwards. And these are the 10 key policy recommendations that are put forward by United Nations Environment Program. The first one is to raise awareness at all levels of the society on to both this infectious diseases and how does it spread and what are what can we do to prevent it. All these have to be given awareness to all sections of the society. And then governance, proper governance should be there. There need to have interdisciplinary approaches. They need to have scientific inquiry and onto social, economic, and ecological aspects. And there should be understanding of the cost. Financing is a very important part. We need to have understanding on the cost essential of interventions and societal impacts, and monitor and regulate the systems linked to zoonosis. And for those who are doing good agricultural practices, we need to incentivize them for sustainable food systems and include biosecurity and control in livestock agriculture, sustainable coexistence of agriculture and wildlife, and then we need to have capacity building. Each and everybody in every sector has to be strengthened. Their capacity needs to be built in for human, animal, and environment stakeholders. And then to operationalize. Right now, we are only speaking about One Health approach, and globally it has started, but we need to operationalize the One Health approach. And the path to recovery, obviously, as we have seen right now, is ecosystem restoration, which means assisting in the recovery of ecosystems that have been degraded or destroyed, as well as conserving the ecosystems that are. It is also well that if we conserve the ecosystems that are already available, that is also well and good. And again, increasing the forest area and biodiversity, that would be one of the fantastic things that we can do. It is said that 1 acre of new forest can sequester about 2.5 tons of carbon annually, and increasing the world's forest area by 1/3 without impacting the. So if this can be done, it's no problem that we can increase the world's forest area by 1/3 without impacting our cities and agriculture. And then we have to restore our streams and rivers to ensure clean filtered water, and then plant native vegetation on the banks to prevent soil erosion, and to reduce the sediment, and in order to keep the water cleaner, to have a healthier aquatic environment. So we need to have a restorative continuum where proper programs are to be set, in the sense that where there be this need to be done in a periodic manner, where it includes a range of activities and interventions that can improve the environment conditions and reverse the ecosystem degradation. It highlights interconnections among the different activities. It recognizes that the specific characteristics of the locally slated for restorative actions dictates the activities best suited. So it should be best suited for a particular landscape. If a landscape is fully contaminated, what we have to do is that we have to have strategies to reduce the societal impacts later, and then improving slowly so that the ecosystem management is happening, and then repairing the ecosystem function, and again started initiating the recovery, and partially recovery and fully recovery. So this is should be a continuum of several activities that we have to strategize. And recently, this is a report, the news from United Nations, posted on June 3rd, 2 days back, in fact 1 day back, where the UN urges the governments to include ecosystem restoration in pandemic recovery plans. So they have urged to ensure that the COVID-19 recovery plans incorporate significant allocations for ecosystem restoration as a central component to delivering a green, sustainable, and fair recovery. So towards this, we can have a positive, we can anticipate that something may happen. And more than that, it is the role of each and every one of you, me and you, to contribute to this cause, and so whatever we can, we do, and then and think about the rest of the things. So with this, I conclude. Thank you so much for having given this wonderful opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your informative and inspiring words. And I'm really sorry for the disturbance made in between. Being responsible to nature is the most worthy activity we can offer nature today. Let's see how the department has shown its responsibility for future generations. For the presentation, I invite Ms. Vandana. Over to you, Vandana.
Okay, thank you so much. So shall I take a leave now? I hope you don't have any questions, right?
Ms. Sarika, it was a
Yeah.
wonderful presentation, and you just briefed us with a very latest and what we can do to save nature. It was. I'm really excited to hear your presentation, because it is after a long time I am getting briefed on what is happening and what we can do and all. I'm very sure that our students have just learned a lot of things from this presentation, and it is a blessing for us to have you here today.
Thank you
And
so much.
I think if anybody wants to ask a question,
Yeah.
do you have time for that one question?
Yeah, I have.
Anybody there?
Hello, ma'am. I also want to congratulate. It was very nice presentation.
Thank you, sir.
We got a lot of knowledge about the significant concerns of the pandemic and all. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
So, Divya, are you there? Cynthia?
Teacher?
Any comments?
Madam, I also congratulate you. It was a nice presentation and something which was novel to us also. So thank you for coming over here and giving our students as well as us a very grand topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
India?
Thank you, Sarika, for your wonderful presentation. I have a query that you have presented the UN initiatives, and to what extent it is being implemented in our state, and to what extent it is being
The policies which I
being-
have shown in that last year's was the 2020, based on the 2020 report, and still they have made that report to operationalize after the pandemic, but still we are amidst the pandemic, so still we have to wait for that, and this has to now that the report has been generated from there only, United Nations report is there, and we have to take this to our country and our state, and then it has to be included in our policy recommendations. So I think being at the government state, Kerala State Council, which is the agency of the government of Kerala to implement science policies, we'll have much of an opportunity to have to incorporate it all with the policies. I hope so. So right now I can't.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And you scientists have more role in this process.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you for illuminating all of us, and that was very excellent one, and hope to meet you again to the department.
Sure, ma'am. Okay,
Thank
ma'am.
you so much.
So thank you so much. Sure, I shall take a leave now. Thank you all.